with the indie labels, there were lots of 50-50 deals actually, and it was typically a feature of independent labels because they didn't have huge money for advances and things. It was a simple 50-50 split of royalties, and they weren't into the. I mean, there wasn't much to recoup, to be honest. All the indie labels were putting out were white label records, things like that. But the 50-50 split, not only of royalties but also of licenses. Do you know what I mean by licensing? Yeah. So let's say Track a Page at the beginning. That featured in a film. Film it was. Who's the guy? Sacha Baron Cohen. Ali G. Yeah, he did an awful film. So that was used in Ali G, and you levy a license fee, and I think it was 15 grand for them to use the track in the film. But then the label would, depending on what deal you have, the label gets a share of that. So your publisher, rather, I should say, your publisher gets a share.
But you wouldn't get royalties on.
No, not on license.
So like the big royalties.
Not in the example that I've given you. Always think about the label ownership of product. Getting product back is very, very difficult. And I say what's most frustrating is when they sit on the product and don't do anything with it. And I'll talk to you about, I don't know why options is there again, but those for me are just the kind of key elements of the contract. Recording contracts are incredibly complex, not as complex as publishing contracts, but those are kind of some of the key considerations that you need to think about. My final slide. The 2 years that I spent in the industry, I mean, it was bizarre. I mean, it was just a bizarre kind of turn of events that took me in that direction. But there was lots of fun. Some of the things were quite amazing. Getting a call on a Wednesday from Wycliffe saying, right, we can do it this Friday, just getting on a plane and going to New York for a day and coming home, things like that. Great fun. And some of the kind of the glamour around it, going to awards and all that, great fun. I met some amazing people, I must say, on the creative side. I can honestly say that I didn't meet one amazing person on the business side. The creative people were absolutely fantastic. I always had particular admiration for studio engineers, actually, for their ability to just sit, through sessions for hours and hours and be so focused on getting that track absolutely right. But it was difficult. I, as a manager, felt it was my job to actually get work for my client, and actually that was my job. That absolutely was my job, but it was particularly tough. And in those days, the main source of income for this particular producer was through doing remixing, and it was in those days that producers could command, producers attached to a certain group or could command quite a lot of money to do a remix, £10,000–20,000 for a remix. I'm assuming that can happen today still. But it was difficult. But, I mean, as a manager, I think I went too far. I used to have to pay parking tickets and all sorts for my artist. I did a hell of a lot for him. He actually was very wise. Unlike the rest of the guys in the crew, my advice to him was tie your money up in property. So I think by the end of year 2, he was sitting on £2 million worth of property. Because we just put the money into really, really cheap interest-free mortgages that he could never really afford. But we had an accountant who signed that he could afford them, and that's how we got mortgages. But he had a lot of money on property. At the height of the property boom in London, sold the money, and that's how he's funded himself in America to this day. The people, I've kind of touched on that already, but you've very, very interesting people, and I think it's interesting to try and understand what motivates people to do what they do. And if you look at within a company structure, you can look at a small label like Independiente. You look at the head of the label. We both know him, Ginny, don't we? Going right the way down to the kind of A&R guys on the ground, and what motivates them is different throughout. There's a question for me about a label like Independiente, actually, and it was about what motivated them to take the So Solid career on. Because if you look at their acts, it was kind of Paul Weller, it was Travis, I think Laura Marlin may have been signed to them at one stage, and then all of a sudden they said, right, we want this big urban act. And for me, it was only about money. That's the only thing I could possibly think that would, because Andy wasn't, it wasn't his thing. So, you know, be careful with the people that you come across. The business lessons for me, you know, I've said those already. Basically, the label will generally make money. The managers will make money. The lawyers will make money, and often it's the artist at the end who doesn't make the money. And in some ways, you've got to decide what your thing is. If your thing is to simply make a living from doing what you love, then I think that's a great kind of mindset to have. It's about earning your living. The boys I was working with were much more about mega fame, mega stars. You know, they even got into trying to bring out a clothing line and things like this. It was a bit P. Diddy for my liking, you know. And they were trying to replicate what was going on in the States, actually. And of course, this marketplace is incredibly different from the States. You know, potentially in the States, you could sell, if you sell a single to a quarter of the population in America, you could do very well, couldn't you? But this is a much smaller marketplace. Hype and spin, and it was about people believing their own hype, really. And record company executives are great at hype and they're great at spin. They're masters at it. Because what they are first and foremost is marketing people. You know, if you actually get into the right label, then those skills will be of great benefit to you. My question is, who are the winners in all this? And the winners are not necessarily the majors, because the majors, you know, they haven't done very well, have they? You know, who would have thought that EMI, you know, a part of the kind of, you know, a brand that's been with us for a very, very long time, no longer exists. So it's an open-ended question. I don't know who the winners are. It can be you if you're achieving what you want to achieve. But the lawyers definitely win financially every time. Questions? Comments? Get debate going if you want. Whatever.
Do you think that, like, the industry is more about the artist? I mean, obviously you said you don't know as much about the industry now, but you say it's more for the artist now than it is for, I mean, there are no big fat cat kind of record companies rather than labels. It's more about the artist and the music. But when you don't get, I mean, looking at the charts and stuff now, you don't get so many boy bands and girl bands. Not that they don't exist, but in my eyes, I'd say there's less of those. Yeah, we have more X Factors.
You know, I don't know. I wonder if, as artists, you're much more savvy now than ever before. You know, even you look at kind of some of the things you're learning now. You know, the curriculum and particularly the approach being taken here is trying to give you a much more rounded experience of the industry as a whole. So I think artists now are probably much more savvy. I think what technology has done for the industry to open up all these new channels direct to your audience is that gives you more power than ever before. You may not be as dependent on these labels. There'll always be major labels. There absolutely will always be. Like there will always be major book publishers. But I think that you've probably got more options now to get your product to the market than you've had before. Actually, that would be my.
I think you've nailed it there, Matt, because I think the winners are us lot if we can multitask. If we can wear every hat, management, PR, marketing, and have those skills, you know, those niche markets are now there for us to exploit in a creative way. But I don't think you can get out there as a musician and artist today and do it without having those skills and having a real understanding of the industry.
Absolutely.